Hi, hello everyone, good evening. I will be presenting you today my speech to inform on the late 1960s horsepower war heat up. In the late 1960s, the streets to the drag strips to the garages were insanely boostedly filled with insane 400 horsepower cars. To Detroit to San Francisco to all over the globe, the labs and racing programs battled to beat the stopwatch. Yet in my own class survey, only 1 out of 13 people even heard or understood the horsepower war, while 9 out of 13 people said they're interested in the racing angles and engineering aspects of that. So this topic is actually a relevant worth talking about. To prepare, I studied a post-drag racing book, Fee's Info, The Age of the Muscle Car, Road and Track, and White's Horsepower War Heat-Up, and my audience survey as well. In this talk, I'll explain 3 things and get into 3 things and how competition in racing escalated that power, how marketings and ratings shaped what people believed about that power, and how rules and insurances ended the war. Now, let's begin and get out of the parking lot and go to the streets and the drag strips where the real war began. First, automaker rivalry and the Racing Homologation and NASCAR NHRA rapidly escalated engines and factory producing big packages and better packages to the mid-1960s to 1970s. According to Post, manufacturers weaponized big blocks like Pontiac's GTO 389, the Ford's 427, Chrysler's 426 Hemi, and Chevrolet's 396 to 427, culminating in the best, the 454 big block. All built on the idea to win on Sunday and sell on Monday. And let me tell you, that's a great advertisement. It really worked. I think we can all say everyone over the age of 50 still has their car from back in the day. And look, from my experience, my dad has a couple of muscle cars and so do I. And we have a 454 big block, we have a small block, we have an LS, and we think the 454 is absolutely the best, better than the LS hands down. Road and Track backs up the headline numbers that fueled arms races, and like the 425 horsepower advertised for the 426 Hemi and 375 horsepower for the 396. Displacement races intensified from 1967 in my own class survey. 4 out of 13 classmates even said racing matters most in what gets built. That's exactly the point of those homologation specials that I wanted to get into today. Street cars are created so the factory can race something similar. And when I asked for everyone for who's their favorite car movie, everybody said Fast and Furious. I mean, that's a perfect example on how racing connects to everyday society, and you kind of see it and experience it every day, on screen, off screen, to culture. It connects to what shows up in the showroom and in person. Secondly, how marketing and ratings, especially the horsepower war and insane horsepower war, often inflated or obscured true performance in period advertising. White reports that around 1968 to 1969, insurers began to actually, charging higher premiums for higher horsepower cars and models. The models at the time are, you had the standard, you had the stock LT3, and then you had your 396, then you have your middle range of 427, and then you had your 454, and classifying the SS to RS to regular, and those were measured without full accessories sometimes, idealized conditions with exaggerated real world output. They're advertising SAE gross horsepower ratings at the time. Personally, I have a 69 Chevelle and a 69 Camaro, and I think those are the best looking years, and they drive the best personally, and they look the best. But even with that on the brochure and on the magazines, they didn't always actually match up what they measured. Road and Track explains how engines were underrated for classing, overrated for ads, creating confusion between brochure numbers and road test results. And since only 1 out of 13 people even heard or understood the horsepower war, that was clarifying gross net ratings versus net ratings helps decode why the era's bold claims actually didn't always reflect what actually felt on the street. Third, federal emission rules safety requirements, actually rising premiums and fuel concerns curtailed the war by 1971 and 72. Fees and Post describe how the 1970 Clean Air Act actually led to compression ratio cuts in 1971 and 72, and they shift from SAE gross to SAE net ratings. On paper, horsepower dropped sometimes dramatically and significantly, even as drivability test results emissions compliance improved. White said, and he also notes that in 2005, how higher insurances and premiums and regulatory practices and pressures pushed Automakers need to tune performance models and pivot marketing from peak horsepower. Even classmates who don't really care still encounter this legacy in today's era, like brand identities, like in films like Ford vs. Ferrari, or of course, Fast and Furious. Once in the dyno rooms, they went quiet under new racing premiums. The war faded, but we still see it, and it still echoes in today's society. Like sometimes here, maybe in Reno or in Germany and Japan, it's just not like it used to be. What should we take away from this, though? I think how competition and racing escalated power, and how marketing and ratings manufactured and magnified perceptions, and how regulation and insurances doused the flames so we can better understand a short chapter that still influences an American car culture today. And here's my take. Cars back in the day, they looked better, they drive better, they were made with better parts, and you actually wanted to buy one. Now, not a lot of kids want to drive, and not a lot of people want to get a car because they don't look as good, they don't drive as good, they break down easily. Now we're just pushing towards electrical cars, so the whole world is changing. And that's why old schools are better than new schools. Thank you. Have a great day.